Grant Hale, 38-year-old groom and public face of Hale Orion Technologies, was smiling at the altar when the wedding doors opened behind him. At first, he thought it was another late guest. Then the music stopped, every head turned, and there stood Nora Vale, 34-year-old ex-wife of Grant, the woman he had divorced after a tragic car crash left her in a wheelchair. Only now she was standing. One hand held a cane, the other held a black folder. The last time Grant had seen Nora this close, she had been sitting in a rehabilitation center with divorce papers on her lap. Her hands had trembled, her legs had barely obeyed her, her eyes had been full of pain she was trying not to show. That day, Grant looked at the wheelchair beside her and said, "My life cannot stop because yours changed." Beside him had stood Sloane Merritt, 31-year-old mistress of Grant and his new bride, smiling like Nora's pain was nothing but an old problem finally removed. Then Sloane looked down at Nora's wheelchair and said, "Grant needs someone who can stand beside him." Grant did not defend Nora. He did not hold her hand. He did not tell Sloane to leave. He did not remember that Nora had crashed while carrying emergency legal documents meant to protect Hale Orion Technologies from a financial disaster Grant himself had helped create. He only saw a broken wife who no longer fit his perfect image. Now Sloane stood at the altar in a wedding dress, wearing the Hale family necklace, smiling like she had won. But Nora had not come to beg. She had not come to cry. She had not come to ask Grant why he abandoned her after the crash. She had come because Grant was about to make one final announcement at his wedding reception, that he would become permanent chief executive and full beneficial authority of his family's billion-dollar tech firm. The problem was simple. It was not his company. It had never truly been his company. Years earlier, Nora's late father had secretly rescued Hale Orion Technologies through a private holding company called Vale Meridian Holdings. When he died, Nora inherited controlling voting ownership. She hid it because she wanted Grant to love her, not her money, not her power, and not the company his family pretended to own. But when the crash left her dependent on a wheelchair, Grant showed her exactly what kind of man he was. So Nora waited. She healed. She investigated. She let him think she was powerless. Then she walked into his wedding and gave one quiet order. The screens changed. The guests gasped. Grant saw the ownership records, the board resolution, the audit trail, the proof that his wedding was partly paid for through company accounts. And Nora said, "You divorced the woman in the wheelchair. You should have checked who owned the company before you tried to crown yourself inside it." Some betrayals do not destroy a woman. They reveal the version of her that was too loyal, too patient, and too loving to fight back before. Grant thought Nora lost her power when she lost the ability to walk, but the truth was, she had been carrying his whole world long before the crash. Stay with this story until the end, because the moment Grant thought he was marrying into a new future was the same moment Nora came to take back everything he stole. Subscribe now for more powerful stories about betrayal, hidden truth, and quiet revenge. And comment justice if you believe the people who abandon others at their weakest should one day face the truth in public. The system was about to fail in front of everyone. On the giant screen above the ballroom stage, the glowing logo of Hale Orion Technologies flickered once, froze, and then showed a thin blue loading circle beside Grant Hale's smiling face. No one in the room understood what it meant yet. The investors kept smiling. The photographers kept lifting their cameras. The board members kept clapping. But at a side table near the ballroom exit, Nora Vale, 34-year-old wife of Grant Hale and the secret controlling owner of Hale Orion Technologies, saw the small glitch and felt her stomach tighten. That was not a normal delay. That was the investor demo system losing its protected connection. If it collapsed now, the company's biggest defense software presentation could fail in front of journalists, executives, board members, and federal observers. One failed public demo could damage the contract, trigger investor panic, and expose how fragile Hale Orion's internal controls had become under Grant's leadership. On stage, Grant Hale, 38-year-old husband of Nora and public face of his family's billion-dollar tech firm, stood beneath the words, "Visionary Leadership Award." He smiled like a man who had never doubted that the room belonged to him. Nora sat 3 tables away from the Hale family table, not beside her husband, not beside his mother, not near the board. She had been placed near junior managers and company staff, close enough to watch Grant shine, but far enough to remind her that the Hale family preferred her quiet, Grant lifted the glass award as the applause grew louder. "This company was built on sacrifice," he said, "on courage, on family legacy." Nora's hands rested in her lap. He thanked his mother. He thanked the board. He thanked Sloan Merritt, 31-year-old investor relations director at Hale Ryan and the polished executive who had recently become Grant's favorite public ally, for restoring investor confidence. He did not thank Nora. Nora smiled anyway. It was the small smile of a woman who had trained herself not to embarrass the people who embarrassed her. Then Rowan Pike, 50-year-old chief financial officer of Hale Ryan Technologies and one of the few executives who knew Nora was more powerful than she appeared, came quickly to her table. His face was pale. He bent low and whispered, "The investor demo is being breached through a vendor access route. Security cannot trace it fast enough. If the system crashes, the contract presentation dies tonight." Nora did not look toward Grant. She did not call attention to herself. She reached into her evening bag, pulled out a slim laptop, and opened it under the tablecloth. Rowan's eyes dropped to the screen. "How do you still have access to that portal?" he whispered. Nora typed a string of old credentials. "Because some doors were built before Grant started pretending he owned the building," she said softly. The access channel was almost forgotten by everyone at Hale Ryan. It belonged to the emergency owner protocol created years earlier when Vail Meridian Holdings had rescued the company from collapse. It was not part of Grant's executive login. It was not part of Maurice Hale's family privileges. It was not part of Sloan's investor relations system. Only the true controlling owner could still use it. On stage, Grant kept speaking. "Our family refused to let Hale Ryan fall," he said. Nora's fingers moved faster. A warning box appeared. Override authorization required. She typed one final command. "Vail Meridian Holdings, owner access via FID." The laptop screen flashed green. Across the ballroom, the giant investor display stopped flickering. The blue loading circle vanished. Grant's face brightened on the screen again, clean and perfect, as if nothing had happened. The investors never noticed. The journalists never noticed. Grant never noticed. Nora closed the laptop before the applause ended. For one quiet moment, her smile faded. 3 years earlier, Grant had come home angry and ashamed. Hale Ryan was days from being broken apart after his late father's reckless expansion deals nearly destroyed it. Grant had thrown his tie onto the floor and said, "You wouldn't understand, Nora. This is billion-dollar pressure." She had said nothing. The next morning, she met Tessa Ward, 44-year-old attorney for Nora and the trusted legal advisor of Nora's late father, in a private office with gray walls and sealed windows. Tessa explained that Bayard Vail, Nora's late father and the private investor who had raised her to hide wealth until character was proven, had left her control of Vail Meridian Holdings. Through that holding company, Nora could buy the majority voting stake in Hale Ryan and save Grant's family firm. Nora agreed, but she made one condition. Her name would stay hidden from public announcements and from Grant. "If Grant knows I own it," Nora had told Tessa, "I'll never know whether he loves me or the company." Tessa had looked at her for a long time before answering. "Hidden power is still power, Nora, but if you hide it too long, someone selfish will start believing it belongs to him." Back in the ballroom, Grant stepped down from the stage as if the applause were oxygen. Sloan reached him first. She touched his collar, smoothing a wrinkle that was not there. Cameras flashed around them. "You looked born for that stage," Sloan said. Grant smiled at her too long. Across the room, Maurice Hale, 62-year-old mother of Grant and proud guardian of the Hale family image, watched Sloan with quiet approval. She did not look offended. She looked satisfied. Nora saw it. Grant, Sloan, Maurice, a silent triangle forming under golden lights. Still, Nora said nothing. That was her greatest weakness. She noticed everything, but she had spent years teaching herself to swallow pain before it reached her face. Maurice crossed the ballroom toward her. Her diamonds shone brighter than her smile. "You should have worn something stronger tonight," Maurice said, glancing at Nora's simple dress. "Grant needs a woman beside him who looks like she belongs in rooms like this." Nora looked around the ballroom, the board members, the investors, the company logo, the screens she had just saved. Then she looked back at Maurice. "I know exactly what room I'm in," she said. Maurice laughed lightly, thinking Nora meant confidence. Nora meant ownership. A message buzzed on Nora's phone. It was from Tessa. "Emergency board structure secure. Your voting control remains untouched. Grant still does not know." Nora locked the screen. Across the ballroom, Sloane slipped her hand around Grant's arm as another photographer raised his camera. For the first time that night, Nora's face changed. The woman trying to take her husband was standing beside the man who thought he owned Nora's company. And somewhere beneath the music, beneath the applause, beneath Grant's perfect smile, something quiet and dangerous had begun to wake. By the time Nora left the ballroom, the system she had saved was stable again. But the marriage she had been protecting was already showing its first visible crack. The restricted shareholder files were opened at 11:43. Nora Vale saw the alert on her phone while she was still in the back seat of her car. The message came from Rowan Pike, 50-year-old chief financial officer of Hale Orion Technologies and one of the few executives trusted with the company's hidden ownership structure. It was only one line. Someone is inside the ownership archive. It is not the board. For a moment, the world outside the window turned silent. Hale Orion did not keep those files in the normal company system. They were sealed behind private legal permissions, voting records, and old owner access protocols. The only people who should have known they existed were Nora, Tessa, Rowan, and a few trusted board officers bound by confidentiality agreements from the original rescue deal. Grant had told Nora he would be at a late investor dinner, but when her car pulled into the underground executive garage, his black car was parked near the private elevator. Nora stared at it. Her heart did not break yet. It simply slowed, as if her body already knew what her mind was not ready to accept. At the security desk, Eli Voss, 46-year-old night security guard assigned to Hale Orion's executive garage, stood up quickly when he saw her. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "I didn't know you were coming tonight." "Neither did anyone else," Nora answered softly. She took out a slim black access card from her purse. It had no company logo, no title, no printed roll. Eli scanned it. The screen flashed green. Owner access via FID. Eli's eyes moved from the screen to Nora's face. Nora placed one finger lightly against her lips. Eli understood enough to say nothing. She entered through the side elevator, the one Grant rarely used because it did not open near the main cameras. The elevator rose in silence. Nora could see her own reflection in the metal doors, calm face, simple earrings, tired eyes. She looked like a wife checking on her husband. She was really an owner walking into a possible theft. The executive floor was almost dark when the doors opened. Only the lights near the glass conference room were still on. Nora stepped out carefully, her heels quiet against the polished floor. Then she heard laughter, a woman's laughter, soft, comfortable, too close. Nora walked toward the sound, then stopped before she reached the conference room door. Grant was inside, so was Sloane. Sloane wore Grant's suit jacket over her dress. His wedding ring sat on the table beside two glasses, shining under the white light like something he had removed hours ago, not seconds ago. Then Grant leaned down and kissed her. Nora's hand gripped the edge of the wall. She did not cry out. She did not open the door. She did not give them the gift of knowing they had hurt her. She only stood there silent, while the man she had protected for years touched another woman in the room where he signed papers for a company he did not own. Sloane pulled away first, smiling. "You keep treating her like she matters," she said. "She doesn't. Nora is a soft little wife with no shares, no spine, and no future in this building." Grant laughed under his breath. "She doesn't even understand what we're building." "Then let me help you build it without her," Sloane said. That sentence changed the pain. It was no longer only betrayal. It was a plan. Sloane reached for a folder on the table and turned it toward Grant. Nora could read the title through the glass. Executive Continuity Restructure. Grant opened it. Sloane tapped the first page. "After the board sees you as public CEO, we clean up the old ownership complications. We move authority into a family continuity trust, then phase out the holding company's voting pressure through board procedure." Grant frowned. "What if the holding company pushes back?" Sloane smiled. "Then we bury them in compliance reviews and delay notices." Most old money beneficiaries never read their own documents until it is too late. Nora's breath caught. Sloane did not know. She did not know the old money beneficiary she was mocking was standing just outside the door. For 1 second, Nora saw another version of Grant in her memory. Years ago, before the awards, before the cameras, before people clapped when he entered rooms, Grant had stood beside her outside the old Hale Orion building. He had been young, ashamed, and afraid of becoming just another spoiled Hale man. "If I ever become arrogant," he had told her, "remind me who I was before people clapped for me." Back then, Nora had believed him. Back then, he had held her hand like she was his safest place. Now he sat across from Sloane, planning to steal power he had never earned. The elevator chimed. Nora moved fast, slipping behind a partial wall near the private lounge. Maurice Hale stepped onto the floor in a silver coat, carrying herself like the building had been waiting for her. She saw Grant and Sloane through the glass. She did not gasp. She did not scold. She simply entered the room and closed the door behind her. "Be careful with timing," Maurice said. "Divorce before the leadership announcement will look cleaner." Nora felt something colder than heartbreak move through her chest. Grant looked uncomfortable for the first time. "Mother, no," Maurice said. "Do not pretend this is emotional. This is about image. Nora does not fit where this family is going." Sloane lifted her chin. "Nora will sign anything if Grant makes her feel guilty enough." Nora closed her eyes. Now she understood. They were not only cheating, they were preparing to erase her. Her first instinct was to walk in, open the folder, and end everything with one sentence. She could have told them the truth. She could have watched their faces change. She could have taken the company back before midnight. But then she looked through the glass again. Grant was nervous. Sloane was confident. Maurice was directing them both. And Nora realized something important. If she revealed herself now, they would hide the rest. They would delete drafts. They would blame confusion. They would pretend Sloane had only been preparing harmless strategy notes. So Nora stepped backward, quietly, carefully, like a woman leaving with her heart broken but her eyes open. In the garage, she called Tessa Ward, her attorney and the only person who had helped her protect the ownership secret from the beginning. Tessa answered on the second ring. "Nora." Nora's voice was steady, but only because she forced it to be. "They are together," she said, "and they are trying to move control of the company." There was a pause. "Do you want me to expose them tonight?" Tessa asked. Nora looked up at the top floor of Hale Orion. Behind the glass, two shadows moved close again. "Not yet," Nora said. "If they think I know, they will hide the rest." She ended the call and got into her car. As the driver pulled away, her phone buzzed. A message from Grant appeared on the screen. "Long meeting, don't wait up. Love you." Nora stared at the lie until the words blurred. Then she looked back at the glowing tower. "Lie carefully, Grant," she whispered. "I am finally listening." And high above her, behind the bright glass walls, someone opened one more restricted file that had never been meant for them. By morning, that file would connect the affair to the company. And by sunrise, Nora would be forced to choose between protecting Grant's reputation and protecting the people his arrogance was about to endanger. The warning call came before sunrise. Nora Vale was still inside Hale Orion's executive archive room when her phone began to vibrate again and again on the metal table. Outside the tall windows, rain beat against the glass so hard it sounded like fingers tapping in panic. She looked at the caller ID. "Rowan," she answered before the second ring ended. "Nora," Rowan said, his voice tight. "The audit team found Grant's vendor agreement, the one Sloane pushed through. If the investors see it before we attach the indemnity packet, they'll open a federal review by morning." Nora's eyes moved to the sealed document case on the table. Inside were the original protection papers for Hale Orion Technologies. Those documents could prove the company had not approved Grant's reckless vendor deal as official policy. They could protect the employees, the board, and the investors from damage Grant had created while chasing a public leadership win. But there was a danger. The same packet carried signatures tied to Nora's hidden authority. If Grant saw those pages closely, he might finally understand that the wife he treated like a shadow was the controlling owner of the company he called his birthright. Rowan lowered his voice. "You do not have to bring them yourself. I can send a courier." Nora looked around the cold archive room. Rows of private files stood behind locked glass. Her father's old holding company seal sat printed on the front page of the case. "No," she said, "this cannot move through a normal courier chain. If Sloane is watching the archive, she is watching deliveries too." Rowan was quiet for a second. "You think she knows?" "She knows enough to be dangerous," Nora said. She snapped the case shut and hurried toward the elevator. At the other end of the executive floor, Sloane saw her. Sloane stood near the investor conference room with Grant's tablet in her hand. Her eyes narrowed when she noticed the black case against Nora's side. She did not shout. She did not stop her. She simply turned away, opened Grant's assistant account, and cancelled the company driver Nora had requested under the excuse of a schedule conflict. Then she sent one message from the assistant system. "Main entrance blocked by press vans. Use East Service Road, urgent." The East Service Road was narrow, badly lit, and dangerous in heavy rain. Sloane did not touch Nora's car. She did not stand in the road. She did not create the storm, the stalled truck, or the bad visibility. She only made sure Nora would be alone, rushed, and sent into the worst possible route. That was the cruelest part. It looked like nothing. Nora received the message as she reached the garage. She frowned, but there was no time to question it. The audit deadline was moving closer. Grant's mistake was already spreading through the company system like smoke under a door. She got behind the wheel and placed the sealed case on the passenger seat. Rain covered the windshield almost instantly. The road outside the building was dark, and by the time Nora turned onto the East Service Road, the city lights were behind her. There were no bright signs there, no clean corporate glass, no photographers, no speeches, only wet pavement, tree shadows, and the hard sound of rain. Her phone rang. Grant, she answered on speaker. His voice came through cold and sharp. Sloan told me you took files from the archive. Stop interfering in things you don't understand. Nora gripped the wheel tighter. I am trying to save you from a mistake. I don't need saving by my wife, Grant snapped. For 1 second, Nora could not speak. The words were small, but they carried years inside them. Years of protecting his pride. Years of letting him stand in rooms she had paid to keep open. Years of smiling while he accepted applause that belonged partly to her. Then headlights flashed ahead. A delivery truck sat half across the service road with its hazard lights blinking in the rain. Another vehicle swerved around it too fast. Nora turned the wheel to avoid both. The tires slid. The document case flew open. White pages scattered across the car like frightened birds. There was the sharp sound of glass, a flash of headlights, then silence. When Nora opened her eyes again, everything was white. White ceiling, white curtains, white light above her face. For a moment, she thought she was still inside the gala ballroom, staring up at the bright stage lights while Grant smiled above her. Then she heard machines. A woman leaned over her with careful eyes. Dr. Lena Cross, 47-year-old rehabilitation physician assigned to Nora's recovery after the crash, spoke gently. Nora, you were in an accident. You are safe now. Nora tried to sit up, but pain and weakness stopped her. Her eyes filled with fear before she could hide it. My legs, she whispered. Dr. Lena's face softened. There is spinal trauma and nerve swelling. Your injury is incomplete, which means we cannot say your mobility is permanently gone. But right now you have serious lower body weakness. Recovery may be slow, painful, and uncertain. Nora turned her head toward the chair near the wall. A wheelchair waited there. It looked too still, too final, like someone had placed a new life in the corner before asking if she wanted it. Grant, Nora asked. He has been called, Dr. Lena said, but Grant did not come alone. Hours later, the door opened, and Grant entered with Sloan and Maryse behind him. Sloan carried a folder against her chest. Maryse looked first at the wheelchair, then at Nora, as if deciding which one embarrassed the family more. Sloan spoke softly but not kindly. She should not have taken those files, she said to Grant. This is what happens when emotional people interfere. Nora looked at Grant, waiting for him to defend her. He did not. Maryse sighed. Grant cannot carry a broken marriage and a broken company. The words landed beside Nora's hospital bed like stones. Grant only looked away. 3 months later, Nora sat in a rehabilitation center with sweat on her forehead and pain in her arms. She had just tried to stand between parallel bars. Her hands had shaken. Her knees had failed. Dr. Lena had caught her before she slipped fully back into the chair. Nora hated that she cried, not because she was ashamed of the wheelchair. Because she hated needing strength in front of people who had stopped giving her love. That afternoon, Grant arrived. Not alone. Sloan came with him. Maryse came too. So did Caldine, 29-year-old public relations aide at Hale Orion assigned to manage Grant's image during the divorce rumors and company audit questions. Grant did not ask to speak in Nora's private room. He chose the public family lounge. Patients passed nearby. A nurse adjusted flowers at a side table. Cal stood by the door pretending not to listen. Grant placed a folder on the table. Nora knew what it was before he opened it. Divorce papers. My life cannot stop because yours changed, Grant said. Nora looked at him for a long moment. Are you divorcing me because I may never walk again? Grant's jaw tightened, but he did not answer. Sloan answered for him. Grant needs someone who can stand beside him. The room went quiet. Nora's hands curled around the arms of her wheelchair. Then Tessa walked in. She took the divorce papers before Nora could touch them. My client will not be pressured while under medical care, Tessa said. Grant's face hardened. Why does my wife need an attorney for a simple divorce? Tessa looked at him calmly. Because simple men often hide complicated motives. Nora looked at Tessa, and Tessa understood the silent order. Not yet. Do not reveal the company. Do not reveal the ownership. Let them think she was small a little longer. Grant removed his wedding ring and placed it beside the papers. Sloan rested her hand on his shoulder. Maryse turned toward the door. Come, Grant, Mari said. There is nothing left here. Nora watched them leave. Then she looked down at the wheelchair, then at the divorce papers, then at the faint company seal on the folder Tessa carried. Her voice came out low but steady. Find out how far they went, Tessa asked. The affair. Nora's eyes lifted toward the door Grant had just walked through. No, she said, the theft. And for the first time since the crash, the silence around Nora did not feel empty. It felt like a locked room waiting for the right key. By the next morning, Tessa would find that the divorce papers were not only meant to end a marriage, they were designed to steal something Grant still did not know Nora already owned. The trap was hidden in the divorce papers. Tessa Ward found it at 2:17 in the morning under a clean paragraph titled Mutual Release of Business Claims. The words looked harmless, almost boring, but Nora knew from Tessa's face that something was wrong. Nora sat in her wheelchair beside the window of the rehabilitation center. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Her body still ached from therapy, but her eyes stayed fixed on the papers spread across her lap. Tessa placed one red mark beneath the clause. Grant, lawyers added language, saying you give up any present or future claim to Hale family business assets, she said. Nora looked at the line again. For a moment she almost laughed. Grant was trying to make her surrender something he still did not know she owned. He thinks he is protecting the company from me, Nora said. Tessa's voice stayed calm. No, he thinks you are too weak to notice. That hurt more, not because it was true, because Grant believed it was true. Nora remembered the family lounge, the divorce papers on the table, Sloane's hand on Grant's shoulder, and Mari's looking at Nora's wheelchair as if it were proof that Nora had become useless. They had all stood over her like she was already defeated. Now the same arrogance was lying in black ink. Tessa crossed out the clause and replaced it with cleaner language. No waiver, no hidden surrender, no business release, nothing Grant could twist later. You will sign only after this is removed, Tessa said. Nora touched the edge of the page. Her wedding ring was no longer on her finger. The skin beneath it still had a pale circle, like her body remembered a promise her husband had already thrown away. Then remove it, Nora said. Remove every lie. By noon, the divorce terms were corrected. Grant's side accepted quickly, probably believing Nora was too tired to fight. Nora signed without crying. Her hand shook only once. It was not weakness. It was the final tremor of a life she was leaving behind. Later that afternoon, Tessa took Nora to a private conference room attached to her attorney's office. The room was quiet, with a long table, sealed files, and a screen showing the ownership chart Grant had never bothered to understand. Tessa pointed to the first line. Vale Meridian Holdings owns 61% voting control of Hale Orion Technologies. Nora stared at the name. Her father's name was not written there, but she felt him in every letter. Tessa continued. You are the sole controlling beneficiary. Grant has executive authority, but not ownership authority. Mari's has family prestige, but no controlling power. Sloane has no legal authority at all. Nora let the silence sit between them. Why did he never know? She asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Tessa looked at her gently. Because he never asked who saved him. He only asked who applauded him. The words entered Nora quietly and stayed there. She remembered her father, Bayard Vale, sitting across from her when she was younger, teaching her how quiet wealth worked. He had never spoken about money like it was a crown. He spoke about it like it was a shield. Never use money to make people stay, he once told her. If they love you only after seeing the crown, they love the crown. That was why Nora had hidden everything. She had not been foolish. She had been hopeful. She wanted Grant to love her before he knew she could buy every room he wanted to enter. She wanted to know that when he held her hand, he was choosing Nora, not Vale Meridian, not voting control, not a billion-dollar company wrapped in the Hale name. But Grant had failed the test without ever knowing he was taking it. The next morning, Dr. Lena stood beside Nora in the therapy room. The parallel bars waited in front of her like a challenge. Nora gripped them. Her arms tightened, her legs trembled. Slowly, Dr. Lena said. Nora tried to rise. For 1 second, her body obeyed. Then pain shot through her lower back, her knees weakened, and she dropped back into the wheelchair with a broken sound she hated hearing from herself. Tears came fast. She turned her face away. Dr. Lena knelt beside her. Do not walk for revenge, Nora. Walk because your life still belongs to you. Nora wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. Her voice was low, rough, and alive. Then let revenge watch. That evening, an email arrived from Grant's assistant. Nora read it once, then again. As part of post-divorce boundary management, your access to Hale Orion Technologies has been removed. Please do not enter company premises without prior approval. For the first time that day, Nora smiled. Tessa, sitting across from her, opened her tablet. "He removed your spouse-level access." Nora looked up. Tessa turned the screen toward her. "Owner access, active. Board authority, active. Emergency voting rights, active." Grant had locked the front door and forgotten Nora owned the land beneath the building. "Let him feel safe," Nora said. The next 2 days moved quietly. Tessa brought in auditors. Mara Flint, 42-year-old forensic company auditor hired by Tessa to review Hale Orion's internal financial records, began tracing Sloane's document requests and Grant's restructuring drafts. Rowan sent files through secure channels. Dr. Lena pushed Nora through therapy until her arms shook. Nora cried less, watched more, spoke only when needed. Then Rowan called Tessa during a late meeting. His voice came through the speaker, tight with fear. "Sloane ordered finance to prepare investor materials," he said. "The language says Grant Hale will assume full beneficial authority after his remarriage." Nora went still. "Remarriage?" she asked. Tessa looked at the phone. On the screen, a new file arrived, a draft announcement. Grant was not only leaving Nora behind, he was already preparing a wedding. Nora closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the woman who had begged to be loved was gone. Somewhere in the silence, the next door had opened, and behind that door was proof that Grant's new wedding was not only personal betrayal, it was becoming part of the theft. The first file proved Sloane had touched the restricted archive. Tessa did not speak when the alert appeared on her office screen. She only turned the monitor toward Nora. The room was dim, the blinds were closed, and the long table was covered with bank records, access logs, divorce papers, and copies of Grant's unsigned leadership drafts. Nora sat in her wheelchair at the end of the table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. On the screen was Sloane's name, not near ordinary company files, not near investor contact lists. She had accessed shareholder documents, voting structures, and old ownership records tied to Vale Meridian Holdings. Nora stared at the timestamp. It was from the same night she caught Grant and Sloane together. Tessa looked across the table at Beck Lorne, 39-year-old private investigator hired by Tessa to uncover Grant and Sloane's actions inside Hale Orion. Beck was quiet, careful, and plain-looking in a way that made people forget he was watching them. He slid a folder toward Nora. "This is only the beginning," he said. Nora opened it. Inside were copies of draft documents labeled Hale Family Continuity Trust. Grant had tried to create a new trust that would move authority away from the hidden holding company and back toward the Hale name. The language was careful, but the intention was clear. Grant was trying to steal control without knowing the real owner was his ex-wife. Mara Flint stood beside the screen with a tablet in her hand. "We also found Mari's calls to 3 board members," Mara said. She told them Grant needed protection from outside control after his remarriage. Nora looked up slowly. "Outside control," she repeated. Mara nodded. She meant Vale Meridian. Tessa's face stayed calm, but her voice hardened. "They are building a story where your company is the enemy of their family." Nora closed the folder. For a moment, she did not look angry. She looked tired. She had loved Grant through his insecurity. She had saved the company when his family was too proud to ask publicly. She had hidden her own power so he would never feel small beside her. And now he was trying to take that power from a woman he thought had none. Beck tapped another file. "There is more." The next records were worse. Sloane had used company money for wedding expenses, not directly. She was too careful for that. She listed floral consultations, hotel deposits, guest hospitality, screen rentals, and private reception materials under executive investor events. Grant had approved the expenses because he planned to use the wedding reception as a leadership announcement for Hale Orion. Tessa leaned back. "So the wedding is not just personal. It is tied to company funds." Nora understood immediately. That changed everything. If Grant planned to use the wedding as a leadership event, then exposing him, there would not be petty revenge. It would be a legal correction on the stage he had built with stolen authority. Beck opened his laptop and played security footage from Hale Orion's executive floor. Nora's body went still. The video showed the night she already remembered too well. Grant and Sloane stood inside the glass conference room. Sloane wore Grant's jacket. Grant's wedding ring lay on the table between 2 glasses. Then they kissed. Nora had seen it before with her own eyes, but watching it on camera made it colder, permanent, undeniable. She did not cry when Sloane touched Grant's face. She did not cry when Grant smiled. She did not cry when Maris entered and spoke to them without surprise. But then Beck paused the footage. Grant's wedding ring sat alone on the table, before the crash, before the hospital, before the wheelchair, before the divorce papers. Nora's eyes filled. That small circle of gold told the truth better than any confession. Grant had removed her from his heart before her body ever failed her. He had not left because she changed after the accident. He had already been leaving. The wheelchair only gave him an excuse. Tessa quietly closed the laptop. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Nora wiped one tear from her cheek and said, "Keep going." Beck opened another video. This one came from the same night. Sloane stood at a computer terminal, removing Nora's name from a spouse access list. Grant stood behind her and approved the change. Maris watched from the doorway. Mara added, "They only removed spouse-level access. They never touched owner-level access." Nora almost smiled. Grant had tried to lock her out of a building she legally controlled. Across town, Grant stood in a bright wedding showroom beside Sloane and Maris. White flowers covered every table. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling. Everything looked clean, expensive, and false. Sloane stood before a mirror while Maris fastened the Hale family necklace around her neck. "This belongs to the woman who restores the Hale name," Maris said. Sloane touched the jewels and smiled. Then it finally found the right neck. Grant laughed softly behind them. None of them noticed the showroom assistant nearby lowering her eyes as if she had heard too much. None of them knew Beck had already found the invoices. The necklace, the flowers, the hotel ballroom, the private investor reception, all of it was now part of the evidence trail. Back at the rehabilitation center that evening, Nora stood between the parallel bars. Dr. Lena watched her closely. Nora's arms shook as she pushed herself upward. Pain moved through her body, sharp and deep, but she did not sit back down. One step, her right foot dragged slightly. Another step, her left knee trembled, then she nearly fell. Dr. Lena caught her before she dropped fully into the chair. "Again tomorrow," Dr. Lena said gently. Nora was breathing hard, sweat touched her forehead. Her face was pale, but her eyes were awake. "Again," Nora whispered, "until I enter standing." Later that night, Tessa arrived at the rehabilitation center with one cream-colored envelope. She placed it in Nora's lap. Inside was Grant and Sloane's wedding invitation, but tucked behind it was a private executive insert. Special announcement from Grant Hale regarding the future leadership of Hale Orion Technologies. Nora read the line once, then again. Grant was not just getting married. He was using the wedding to crown himself. Nora looked at Tessa. "Then let him build the stage," she said. Tessa's voice was quiet. "And when he stands on it," Nora folded the invitation closed, "I will walk in." The room went still around those words, not because walking would be easy, but because for the first time since the crash, Nora had chosen exactly where her pain would take her. The archive door would not open at first. Tessa Ward, 44-year-old attorney for Nora Vale and the trusted legal advisor of Nora's late father, pressed Nora's black owner card against the scanner, but the small light stayed red. For one sharp second, the hallway went silent. Nora's hand tightened around the arm of her wheelchair. Then Tessa entered a second authorization code. The scanner beeped. Green. The lock released with a heavy click. Tessa pushed the door open, and cold air rolled out like the room had been holding its breath for years. Inside were steel cabinets, sealed document boxes, and old leather folders marked with the name Vale Meridian Holdings. This was not a normal attorney archive. This was the room where Nora's father had hidden the truth that kept Hale Orion Technologies alive. Nora stared at the files. For years, Grant had walked through glass offices, stood on stages, accepted praise, and called Hale Orion his family's empire. The Hale name was on the building, but Nora's blood was in the documents. Tessa rolled Nora beside a long table and placed one thick folder in front of her. "This is the original rescue agreement," Tessa said, "signed by your father and Grant's father." Nora opened the file slowly. The first page carried the old Hale Orion logo. The next page carried her father's signature. Beneath it was the signature of Edwin Hale, Grant's late father and the former head of Hale Orion Technologies, whose reckless expansion deals had nearly destroyed the company before Vale Meridian rescued it. Nora's throat tightened. Tessa said, "Edwin Hale came to your father when the company was days from being broken apart. Debt, failed contracts, bad acquisitions, and emergency lender pressure. He begged Bayard for help." Nora looked down at the agreement. Her father had not simply invested. He had taken control. Bayard Vale agreed to save Hale Orion only if Vale Meridian Holdings received 61% voting control. The Hale family could keep the name, the offices, the public leadership, and the legacy story because Bayard believed a public fight would destroy employee confidence, but real control belonged to Vale Meridian. And after Bayard died, that control passed fully to Nora. Nora touched her father's signature with shaking fingers. "So this is why everyone still calls it Grant's family company," she whispered. "Yes," Tessa said, "because you allowed them to." Nora closed her eyes. A memory came back. She was younger, standing with her father near the window of his private study. Bayard had always looked calm, even when dealing with powerful men. He told Nora that money was dangerous when used to buy love. "Never use power to make someone stay," he had said. "If they only love you after seeing the crown, they love the crown." Nora had believed him. That was why she hid everything from Grant, not because she was weak, not because she was foolish. She wanted to know if Grant loved the woman beside him, not the company behind her. Tessa handed her a small envelope from the back of the folder. It was sealed with Bayard's initials. Nora opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "If the Hale boy loves you, let him love you before he knows what I left you, but never surrender the power I gave you to protect yourself." Nora read the sentence once, then again. Her face broke before she could stop it. She lowered her head and cried quietly, not like a woman defeated, but like a daughter finally understanding that her father had seen the danger before she did. Tessa did not rush her. The room stayed still around them. Then another memory rose, softer and crueler. Years earlier, before the awards and cameras, Grant had sat with Nora outside the Hale Orion building after losing a major presentation. He had looked ashamed and young, not like a powerful executive, but like a man afraid he would never become enough. "I feel like a fraud," he had told her. Nora had taken his hand. "Then become the kind of man people won't regret believing in," she said. Back then, Grant had squeezed her fingers like her faith could save him. Now he was trying to erase the woman who had given him that faith. Across town, Grant stood in a private wedding planning room with Sloane. White flowers covered the table. A screen showed a draft video titled, "The Future of Hale Orion Leadership." Grant watched himself on the screen, smiling beside the company logo. "After the wedding," he said, "I want Nora removed from every company narrative. No sympathy stories, no old photos, nothing." Sloane stood beside him, holding a glass of champagne. "History belongs to whoever controls the announcement," she said. Grant smiled. "Then we announce a new history." Back in the archive room, Tessa opened another file. "Then we answer with the real one." She laid out the legal plan with quiet precision. First, they would secure board votes before the wedding. Then they would freeze Grant's unauthorized restructuring documents. They would preserve the access logs, the false investor language, the wedding invoices, and Sloane's document trail. They would prepare a public ownership disclosure. Grant would be removed during his own leadership announcement, not as personal revenge, but as a legal correction on a stage he chose himself. Sloane's tampering would be referred to regulators. Nora would be protected from being painted as a bitter ex-wife. Nora listened without moving. "I do not want to look wounded," she said. Tessa met her eyes. "Then we will make the truth look organized." Later, at the rehabilitation center, Dr. Lena Cross, 47-year-old rehabilitation physician getting Nora's recovery after the crash, helped Nora back into bed after another painful therapy session. Nora's legs still trembled from the effort, but her mind was no longer trapped inside the chair. That night, Nora opened one final envelope from her father's archive. Inside was a black access card. No logo, no title, only her name engraved in silver. Under it was one last note from Bayard. "When you are ready to stop asking permission, use this." Nora held the card in her palm. For the first time since the crash, she smiled. And somewhere far away, Grant was still planning an announcement for a throne that had never belonged to him. By morning, Nora would test whether Grant's cruelty was only private, or whether he was arrogant enough to abuse power in front of witnesses. The whole lobby turned when Grant shouted her name. "Nora." His voice cracked across the marble floor of Hale Orion Technologies like a slap. Nora sat in her wheelchair near the front security desk, one hand resting on the armrest, the other holding a slim black folder against her lap. Employees stopped walking. Assistants lowered their phones. 2 board interns froze near the elevator. Grant stood 10 feet away in a dark suit, his face tight with shock and embarrassment. Sloane stood beside him, dressed in pale cream, polished enough to be photographed. Her eyes moved from Nora's wheelchair to the company badge clipped near the security desk, then back to Nora's face. "What are you doing here?" Grant asked. Nora looked up calmly. "I have business in the building." Grant laughed once, but there was no humor in it. He looked around, noticing the employees watching. His shame quickly turned into anger. "This building is not a place for personal scenes," he said. Nora held his gaze. "I agree." That simple answer made him angrier because she did not sound broken. Grant stepped closer and lowered his voice, but not enough to keep others from hearing. "You are not my wife anymore. You do not belong here." Sloane gave a soft, fake sigh. "Grant, maybe she is confused. Recovery can be difficult." The insult was gentle enough to sound polite, but sharp enough to cut. Nora did not answer her. Grant raised his hand toward security. "Escort my ex-wife out." A painful silence filled the lobby. Eli Voss, 46-year-old security guard at Hale Orion who had once scanned Nora's owner card in the executive garage, was covering the front desk that afternoon. He walked toward Nora with careful steps. His face showed the smallest flash of concern. Nora handed him her black access card. Eli scanned it. The security screen flashed green. Override access, executive ownership. Eli's eyes widened. For 1 second, he forgot to breathe. Grant snapped, "Is there a problem?" Nora lifted one finger gently to her lips, almost too small for anyone else to notice. Eli understood. Something bigger than Grant was happening. He cleared his throat and handed the card back to Nora with both hands. "No problem, sir," he said. Then he bent slightly toward Nora. His voice softened. "Ma'am, I can escort you outside if you would like." The word ma'am landed strangely in the lobby, respectful, careful, almost official. Grant did not catch the meaning. He only heard obedience. Sloane stepped closer, her smile thin. "Careful with the chair," she said. "We do not need a sympathy performance in the lobby." A few employees looked away, ashamed to have heard it. Nora felt the words, but she did not let them show. She had already learned something important. People like Grant and Sloane became careless when they thought cruelty had no cost. So she allowed Eli to wheel her toward the glass doors. She allowed the lobby to watch. She allowed Grant to believe he had won. But as Eli pushed her outside, he leaned close enough to whisper, "I saw the screen, Mrs. Hale." Nora looked forward. "Remember what you saw," she said. Across the lobby, Grant turned away like a man wiping dirt from his shoe. Sloane slipped her arm through his. Near the elevators, Maurice Hale, 62-year-old mother of Grant and guardian of the Hale family image, watched the scene with cold satisfaction. She had arrived during the humiliation and made no attempt to stop it. "That woman has mastered looking helpless," Maurice said quietly to Sloane. Sloane smiled. "After the wedding, no one will remember her." Nora heard enough before the doors closed behind her. Outside, the air was cool. For a moment, the reflection in the glass showed her sitting small beneath the giant Hale Orion logo, but she knew what they did not. The real board meeting was not inside the building. It was scheduled off-site in a private conference room Tessa had already secured. Nora's visit had been a test. Tessa wanted to know whether Grant would abuse company authority in public, whether security would follow illegal orders, whether Sloane would add another insult with witnesses nearby, whether Maurice would reveal her approval. Grant had given them everything. That evening, Nora returned to the rehabilitation center, exhausted. Dr. Lena waited beside the parallel bars, but this time there was a cane on the mat. Nora stared at it. "I am not ready," she said. Dr. Lena did not argue. "Then touch it first." Nora reached for the cane, her fingers wrapped around the handle. It felt too light for something that was supposed to help carry her future. Slowly, painfully she stood. Her legs trembled, her back burned. Her breath came short. One step, then another. By the fourth step, sweat gathered near her hairline. By the sixth, her knee shook badly. On the seventh, she nearly fell. Dr. Lena caught her before she hit the floor. Nora gripped the cane with both hands, angry tears in her eyes. "I only need enough steps to reach the altar," she whispered. Dr. Lena held her steady. "No," she said. "You need enough steps to leave it behind." The words stayed with Nora long after therapy ended. Later that night, Tessa arrived with Rowan's newest evidence. Sloane had approved wedding expenses through company accounts as executive investor hospitality. The flowers, the venue deposit, the screen rentals, even the private reception materials were tied to Hale Orion money. Tessa placed the papers on Nora's bed. "If he wants the company at his wedding," she said, "the company will attend." Nora looked at the documents, then at the cane beside her chair. Her phone buzzed. A message from Grant appeared. "Do not come to my wedding. Have some dignity." Nora read it once. Then she stood slowly, one hand on the cane. Tessa watched her. "Should I respond?" Nora looked toward the window, where the dark glass reflected a woman no longer begging to be seen. "No," she said. "Let him enjoy the silence." And in that silence, Grant's wedding began to feel less like a celebration and more like a room waiting for its doors to open. Grant signed the lie with a gold pen. The paper lay on a white marble table inside the wedding venue's private groom's suite. Around him, assistants moved flowers, checked seating cards, and tested the large screens that would later show romantic photos of him and Sloane. None of them knew the document in front of him had nothing to do with marriage. It was a leadership announcement. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Grant Hale ASSUMES full beneficial authority over Hale Orion TCHNOLOG." Grant smiled as he wrote his name at the bottom. He did not know Rowan had already sent a copy to Tessa. He did not know the board had met the night before. He did not know that every word he had just signed had become the final nail in his own downfall. Outside the groom's suite, the wedding venue looked like a dream built for rich people who wanted the world to admire them. White flowers covered the walls. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling. The aisle was polished marble. Investors, board members, social guests, and selected business reporters moved through the hall in expensive clothes, whispering about how smart Grant was to combine his wedding with a major company announcement. Grant believed they had come to honor him. They had really come to witness the truth. In a private legal conference room behind the venue, Tessa stood at the head of a long table with a stack of signed board papers in front of her. Nora sat beside her, dressed in deep navy, her cane resting across her lap. The color was quiet, elegant, and firm. She had not chosen white. She was not there to look like a bride. She was there to look like a woman who had survived being erased. Perrin Moss, 64-year-old chairman of Hale Orion's board and the executive responsible for confirming leadership authority, sat across from her with the emergency resolution in front of him. "The emergency vote is complete," Perrin said. "Grant Hale's restructuring plan is rejected. His executive authority is suspended effective immediately. Sloane Merritt is suspended pending investigation. Nora Vale is recognized as controlling owner and interim chair." Nora lowered her eyes for a moment. She had waited years to hear the truth spoken in a room like this. Not whispered, not hidden, not buried under the Hale name, spoken clearly. Still, it did not feel like joy. It felt like standing at the edge of a life she had once begged to keep, knowing she would have to let it burn in public. Tessa leaned toward her. "Everything is legal before you step into that room," she said quietly. "This is not revenge pretending to be justice. This is justice arriving on time." Nora nodded, but her fingers tightened around the cane. Across the venue, Sloane found Rowan Pike near a side hallway. Rowan was checking messages on his phone when she stepped in front of him. "I know you have been talking to auditors," she said. Rowan looked up slowly. Sloane's wedding robe brushed the floor and diamonds glittered at her ears, but her smile was sharp. "People who betray powerful families do not work again," she said. Rowan's face did not change. "Then it is fortunate," he said, "that the powerful family is not the one you think it is." For the first time that morning, Sloane looked unsure. "What does that mean?" Rowan slipped his phone into his pocket. "It means you should enjoy the flowers while they still look expensive." He walked away before she could answer. Sloane watched him go, her confidence cracking just enough to show fear underneath. Not far from there, Maurice stood in the bridal suite behind Sloane, holding the Hale family necklace in both hands. The jewels caught the light like frozen fire. Sloane turned toward the mirror. Maurice placed the necklace around her neck and fastened it slowly. "Today," Maurice said, "you become what Nora never could." Sloane smiled at her reflection. "A Hale," Maurice met her eyes in the mirror. "A woman worth displaying." Sloane touched the necklace and lifted her chin. The insult was meant for a woman who was not in the room, but somehow it seemed to make the air colder. Back at the rehabilitation center earlier that morning, Nora had stood in the therapy room wearing that same navy dress. Dr. Lena stood a few steps away, ready to catch her if she fell. Nora's hand shook on the cane. "Slow," Dr. Lena said. Nora took one step. Pain moved through her back and down her legs. She took another. Her breath trembled. By the middle of the room, her face had gone pale. By the final step, her knee nearly gave out. She reached for the wall, but she did not fall. Dr. Lena moved close. "You do not have to prove anything to him." Nora looked at her reflection in the therapy mirror. The woman staring back was thinner than before the crash. Tired, marked by pain, but not gone. "I'm not proving it to him," Nora said. Now in the private conference room, Nora remembered those steps. Every one of them had hurt. Every one of them had been hers. Tessa's phone buzzed. She read the message and turned the screen toward Nora. It was the signed leadership document, Grant's final lie. Nora looked at his signature for a long moment. Then she said, "He signed it." Tessa nodded. "Yes." Nora closed her eyes. The man who divorced her, because she could not stand beside him, had just claimed authority over the company she owned. At the wedding he paid for with money he was not allowed to use, beside the woman who helped him erase her. There was nothing left to wait for. The ceremony music began. Guests rose. Sloane appeared at the back of the ballroom wearing Mari's necklace. She walked slowly down the aisle, smiling like a woman entering a kingdom. Grant waited at the altar, proud and shining, his hands folded in front of him like a man already crowned. The officiant opened his book. The room became still. Then Tessa's phone buzzed again. The event technician was ready. Nora placed one hand on the cane. "Switch the screens when I stop walking," she said. Then the back doors opened. A cane tapped once against the marble. Then again, everyone turned. Nora stepped into the room. The cane struck the marble once, and the whole wedding stopped breathing. Nora stood in the open doorway, one hand wrapped around the cane, the other holding a black folder against her side. Her navy dress moved softly around her legs. She was not steady. She was not graceful in the way people expected from women in expensive rooms. Every step cost her something, but she was walking. Grant stared at her like the floor had opened beneath him. Sloane's smile died first. Then her eyes dropped to Nora's cane, then to the folder, then to Tessa standing a few steps behind her. Miles Renner, 58-year-old wedding minister hired by Grant and Sloane to lead the ceremony, lowered his book and looked toward Grant for instruction. No one gave him any. Nora took another step down the aisle. The guests turned in waves. Investors whispered. Board members sat frozen. Reporters near the back lifted their cameras without realizing they were holding their breath. Grant's lips parted. "You're walking," he whispered. Nora stopped halfway down the aisle and looked at him. "That is not the part you should be afraid of." The room went even quieter. Mari stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "This is obscene," she said. "Remove her." Grant lifted one hand toward security, desperate to regain control. "Get her out." At the side of the ballroom, Dane Mercer, 45-year-old head of security assigned to the wedding through Hale Orion's event contract, stepped forward. He looked at Grant, then at Nora. Then he gave Nora a small, respectful nod. "Ma'am," one word, that was all it took. Grant's face changed. Sloane's fingers tightened around her bouquet. Mari's looked from Dane to Nora, as if the room had started speaking a language she did not know. Nora did not smile. She only turned slightly toward Tessa. Tessa lifted her hand. The wedding screens changed. The soft slideshow of Grant and Sloane disappeared. The romantic music cut off. White flowers and engagement photos were replaced by clean legal documents. The first screen read, Vale Meridian Holdings, 61% VOTING control of Hale Orion TCHNOLOGIS. A murmur spread through the ballroom. The second screen appeared, Sole CONTROLLING beneficiary, NORA Vale. Someone gasped. The third screen appeared, Emergency Board Resolution. Grant Hale removed from executive authority. Grant stepped back. "No," he said. The fourth screen appeared, Sloane MERITT suspended pending investigation. Sloane turned pale beneath Mari's necklace. Nora walked one more step. Her hand trembled on the cane, but her voice did not. "For years," she said, "Grant told the world he carried Hale Orion. The truth is he inherited a name. I carried the debt. I carried the risk. I carried the silence." Grant shook his head. "Nora, stop. You're embarrassing yourself." Nora turned toward the board table. "Am I?" Perrin Moss stood from the front row, buttoned his jacket and faced the room. "No, Ms. Vale," Perrin said. "You are recognized as controlling owner and interim chair of Hale Orion Technologies." The room erupted in whispers. Grant's mother reached for the back of her chair. Sloane tried to step away from the altar, one hand moving toward the necklace like it had suddenly become too heavy. Tessa stopped her with one calm sentence. "Ms. Merritt, leaving will not remove your name from the evidence." Sloane froze. Tessa turned to the room. The investigation found that Sloane Merritt accessed restricted shareholder records, helped prepare false investor language, and routed wedding expenses through company hospitality accounts. The guests looked around at the flowers, the crystal lights, the polished marble floor. The wedding itself had become evidence. Tessa continued. She also cancelled Nora Vale's company driver on the night of the crash and sent her through the unsafe East Service Road using an assistant account. Sloane's face twisted with panic. "I did not cause the crash," she said. Nora looked at her for a long moment. The rain came back to her in pieces, the dark road, the stalled truck, Grant's voice on speaker. The sound of the document case flying open. "No," Nora said quietly. "You only made sure I was alone in the rain." Sloane had no answer. Grant reached for his phone, but the screen had locked. His badge beeped from his jacket pocket, then flashed red. His executive account was suspended. His company access was gone. One by one, board members moved away from his side. Investors stepped back as if his disgrace could stain their clothes. Maris pulled out her phone. "I will call family security." Lena Bell, 36-year-old event manager responsible for the wedding's contracts, vendors, and venue coordination, approached her carefully. "Mrs. Hale, this event contract was paid through accounts now under review. Security takes instruction from company authority." Maris slowly turned toward Nora. For the first time, she looked afraid. Sloane looked at Grant, her voice breaking. "You told me it was yours." Grant's jaw tightened. Eyes moved from the screens to the guests to Nora. "It was supposed to be," he said. The words exposed him more than the documents. Nora felt the last piece of hope inside her turn to ash. He had not lost his way by accident. He had believed her life, her work, her father's legacy, and her silence were things he deserved to take. Grant stepped down from the altar. "You ruined me," he said. Nora's eyes filled, but her voice stayed calm. "No, Grant, I stopped protecting you." He came closer, lowering his voice so only she and the front rows could hear. "You loved me," he said. "You won't destroy me completely." Nora looked at the man she had once saved from every consequence. "I did love you," she said. "That was your last advantage." Then she opened the black folder. Grant saw there was still one document left. It was the signed leadership announcement he had written that morning, the lie with his name at the bottom. Nora held it up for the room to see. "You divorced the woman in the wheelchair," she said. "You should have checked who owned the company before you tried to crown yourself inside it." The silence that followed was not empty, it was judgment. And in that judgment, Grant Hale finally understood that Nora had not walked into his wedding to win him back. She had walked in to take back the world he thought she was too broken to protect. The cameras exploded the moment Nora entered the press room. Flashes hit her face from every direction. Reporters shouted her name. Employees stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls. Board members sat behind the long table, quiet and serious, as if the company itself was holding its breath. Nora walked in slowly with her cane, not perfectly, not without pain, but standing. The Hale Orion logo glowed behind her, the same logo Grant had once used as his throne. Now Nora stood in front of it as the controlling owner and interim chair. She did not look like a woman begging for sympathy. She looked like a woman who had survived the worst day of her life and decided to build something better from it. Tessa walked beside her. Rowan stood near the side wall with company files in his hand. Dr. Lena sat quietly in the back row, watching Nora with the kind of pride that did not need applause. A reporter called out, "Ms. Vale, did you expose Grant Hale for revenge?" Nora stopped at the podium. For a second, the room became silent. "No," she said. "I exposed him because truth should not have to beg for permission." The room went still. Then Nora opened the folder in front of her and began. She announced a full ethics review inside Hale Orion. She announced a leadership restructuring that removed every executive connected to Grant's false authority plan. She announced an independent review of restricted archive access, vendor approvals, and executive spending. She announced accessibility initiatives for injured employees, including office redesigns, transportation support, paid recovery leave, and confidential reporting protections for employees pressured by senior leadership. Then her voice softened. Hale Orion will also create a recovery fund for accident survivors and workers facing life-changing injuries, Nora said. No one should lose dignity because their body changes. A few employees lowered their eyes. Some remembered seeing Grant order security to remove Nora from the lobby. Some remembered looking away when Sloane mocked the wheelchair. Some remembered doing nothing. Nora did not accuse them. That made the shame heavier. She finished by saying the company would fully cooperate with investigators reviewing the misuse of funds, false investor statements, and unauthorized access to restricted ownership records. This was no longer only her pain. It had become policy. It had become protection for others. Weeks earlier, Grant had stood in a wedding ballroom thinking he was about to become permanent CEO. Now he had no executive position, no board influence, no company access, no bride, no clean public image left to protect. His fall was not instant prison or dramatic shouting. It was worse in a slower way. Civil lawsuits followed him. Regulators reviewed his signatures. Investors pulled back from his personal ventures. Personal guarantees tied to unauthorized vendor deals began closing around him. Every door that once opened because of the Hale name now opened only to questions. Sloane's ending was just as cold. She was fired from Hale Orion. Her name appeared in the internal report for restricted document access, company fund misuse, false investor language, and her role in isolating Nora before the crash. No firm wanted an investor relations director who had turned a wedding into an evidence file. She had wanted to replace Nora. Instead, her name became attached to the scandal that restored Nora. Maris requested a private meeting 2 days after the press conference. Nora agreed. They met in Nora's new office, a quiet room high above the lobby. Maris entered dressed in black, her face proud but tired. For once, she did not look around like she owned the room. She looked at Nora and said, "Your father should have told us." Nora did not answer right away. Her wheelchair sat near the window, folded neatly beside the glass. Sunlight touched its metal frame. "My father knew exactly who needed to be told," Nora said. "You just never thought I was worth asking." Maris opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in Nora's memory, Maris had no sentence sharp enough to save her pride. Later that week, Nora returned to the rehabilitation center. She brought new mobility equipment, therapy grants, and funding for patients whose insurance had run out too soon. In the therapy room, June Parker, 41-year-old accident survivor recovering from serious lower body injuries at the same rehabilitation center, sat in a wheelchair near the parallel bars, crying into her hands after a failed standing attempt. Nora did not give her a speech. She moved beside her and sat close enough for June to know she was not alone. "Your body changing," Nora said gently, "does not make you less yours." June looked at her. Nora placed one hand on her cane. "I had to learn that slowly too." Back at Hale Ryan, Tessa stood in Nora's office and looked at the folded wheelchair by the window. "Do you want it removed?" Tessa asked. Nora turned toward it. For a moment, she saw the hospital room, the divorce papers, Sloane's smile. Grant's ring on the table, the lobby doors closing behind her. Then she saw the wedding doors opening and the room going silent. "No," Nora said. "It carried me when people walked away." That afternoon, Nora walked through the Hale Ryan lobby. Employees stood as she passed, not because she married Grant, not because she belonged to the Hale family, because she owned the room. Outside the glass doors, Grant stood on the sidewalk in a dark coat. No badge, no bride, no mother beside him. No applause, only his reflection staring back from the building he had mistaken for his inheritance. He stepped toward the entrance, but Dane blocked him. "Tell her I just want to talk," Grant said. Dane did not move. "Ms. Vale is in a board meeting." Grant looked past him and saw Nora walking away. Her cane tapped once, then again. She did not turn around. Grant Hale thought a woman in a wheelchair had no place in his future. He never understood that she was the reason he had a future at all. And by the time Nora Vale finally stood, she no longer needed to stand beside him. She stood above everything he lost. In her office upstairs, one unopened investigator's envelope waited quietly on the desk, not because Nora needed another revenge, but because she had finally learned the difference between pain and purpose. Pain was what Grant left her with. Purpose was what she built after he was gone.